Hey everyone, this is M. Shanae for Oak Forest Audio. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the topping D90 MQA. A big thanks first and foremost to the Apos team for giving me a chance to hear this. Functionally, this is going to be the same in terms of performance to the topping D90. The difference is this version is $799 and does add the MQA support. Now, MQA support is only through USB. But again, the circuit is the same as what's in the D90. The only technical difference is there is an upgraded XMOS chip in this that does help it handle and process the MQA. Now, let's start by taking a look at the build quality and the overall workmanship of the product. Only difference between the non-MQA and MQA variants is the little badge in terms of how the chassis is put together. Otherwise, both units are going to have the front panel, 2 buttons, power, selection, up, down. You can also adjust the digital volume attenuation with the up-down buttons, of course, and cycle through menus as you're making selections. In terms of the chassis, it is aluminum, nicely put together. I mean, really seamless. I can't feel any gaps, any seams. Very nicely machined. On the back, we have a variety of both analog and digital inputs and outputs. I did plug into each. Nice, solid feel. No wiggle, no looseness, no insecurity. You ever plug something in and it just feels not quite right? You're unsure of the connection. You're unsure of... It just feels off, right? No, with the D90, we don't have that. You plug it in, it's got a solid... Some of the connections have that click. Some of them just have that nice, meaty, tactile response of I'm in. And of course, when you go to unplug, it's not excessively difficult. You're not going to be yanking things in and out. Again, well-machined inputs in the back, well-machined outputs. Switching back to the front panel, again, very well put together. Got the rubber feet that are on the bottom. Set it down, snug. Another important feature of this is there is a, here's the bad guy, there it is. This little fella, right? Voltage selection, US and non-US voltage selection so that you can obviously have the right power going in, and the device does not cut on if the wrong selection and input are well selected. Safety feature, I dig it. Build quality is good. The only qualm or problem I have with the unit and the build is function, right? The front panel requires that you use the remote. The display will show you everything, but the selection button and up and down buttons do not cycle through all of the options. So you need the remote absolutely to get full functionality. And when you have it, you can access everything. The filters, the XLR outs, the RC outs, switching between the two, running both at the same time along with a couple of other features. So we did a little bit of a zoom in there. I hope you guys enjoyed having a closer look at the topping D90 MQA. Functionally, I don't have any problem with it. I did mention that the front panel does not have everything you need to operate it. You have to use the remote. I've got an RME 80i2 here with me, and what I like about this product is the front panel has everything you need. The remote is just a convenience. Now, as far as reviewing this, I did use the HD 600 from Sennheiser as well as the SMSL SP200 amplifier. I felt that these were both sufficient in allowing me to hear the characteristic of the D90 as a DAC, as well as compare it to a variety of other DACs. And just kind of figure out where the value is, figure out how it compares to other products. Now, in terms of MQA playback, I did stick to using an Android device, a OnePlus 7T Pro McLaren 5G, with the USB Audio Player Pro. I always want to put Android in there, but Android is not in the name. But it should be because it's an Android app. Nonetheless, purely in terms of function, again, you need the remote to operate everything, but the MQA playback, which comes exclusively through USB, right, works perfectly fine. I had no problems. I plugged it in. The app picked it up right away. I do have the software decoding for MQA on the device, and it simply worked, which I appreciated. Now, in terms of how it sounds, the best way to describe the D90's sound is it's clean, it's lean, but it's got a nice snap, a pop, a sense of immediacy. I'm a crappy snapper and popper. I didn't learn it until I was an adult. But I like that, you know what I mean? It's a snappy sounding DAC, right? It does a better job than I do at kind of presenting just a touch of aggressiveness, but a pop of texture, a pop of just, it's engaging to listen to. It's still lean. It's still clean. It's a little bit maybe dry or lean in the mid-range. Top end is, not to say forward, but it's just overall, right? Doesn't really add anything to the music except for that slight bit of pop or attention. Comparison. The Shit Modi 3, an amazing $100 DAC. This circuit does have a richness, a wetness, a fullness that really makes the music kind of beautiful. Topping D90 doesn't have that. It doesn't have that slight, full kind of, not to say warm, but just added engagement in terms of the mid-range, that slight bit of just release and kind of body in the mid-range. No. Again, clean, linear presentation, right? Just adds a bit of pop while you're listening. Now, in terms of comparisons, I have a couple of products. I do have both the Shit Modi 3, which is $100. I do have the Topping D10, which is their $100 DAC. I have the Army ADI2, which is my personal flagship with a reference DAC for me, and also have the JDS Labs original EL DAC. So we've got a couple of units to compare it to. As of right now, the lower end models are all right around $100. Modi 3 is still $99 new. Topping D10 is $99 too. And again, the EL DAC, it was $250, $300 originally. It is now right at about $100, $110, sometimes $150 second hand. If you're a little bit crafty, again, you can get an amazing DAC for like $100 on the second-hand market. But now, the Army ADI2 is $1,200. There's a newer version called the FS. The FS is slightly fuller than the original. It has a different harmonic profile than the original does. Go online, read about it. They've measured it, they documented it. It's pretty cool. But second-hand price of it is around $1,000. So in terms of performance, I do feel that the Army ADI2 is price-wise in a bit of a different league from D90. And then, of course, everything underneath it is a different league. I like these kinds of comparisons because this is kind of a price point where good products really differentiate themselves, right, and necessitate a worthwhile upgrade from lower-end stuff. On the other hand, good products at this price point don't fall too far behind the exceptional products that are in that next price bracket. I really do feel that overall the Army ADI2 is a better DAC. It negatives, right? It lacks that pop, that kind of immediacy that the D90 has. A lot of people feel like this product is a bit soft. It doesn't have, you know, the punch, the kick, the impact that other DACs do. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's exceptionally transparent. Benefits of this: number one, the front-facing panel is all incumbent. It does everything that you could need it to do, which is great. The remote is a convenience. Differences as well in terms of the presentation of sound. With the ADI2, right, I got a slightly blacker background, so less noise. I was able to hear just more micro detail, better release, reverb, right, as things are falling into silence. The ADI2 just sustained that decay into silence longer. So I was able to hear things quieter as they traveled further into the background. Again, detail, I was able to hear just more micro detail, not a massive amount, right? D90 to ADI2 wasn't a massive difference in terms of detail. Now, where there was a rather apparent and noticeable difference is cohesion. The staging for ADI2 was, in my opinion, more cohesive. So there was slightly more, well, audible, right, space in between the instruments, of course, within the recorded space, but the movement within that space was more cohesive. Sometimes, in my opinion, that slight pop that you get with some DACs doesn't create a disjointed presentation, but takes away from the cohesiveness because it's sudden, it draws your attention, you know, but it seems a little bit immediate, right? It moves, things move quickly in and around the stage. Reality isn't quite like that. Again, what I like with ADI2 is when I move up to it from D90, I personally, in my home systems with my headphones, don't feel like it lacks the impact or lacks that tactility, that edge that I appreciate and that real music has. What I find is that because that edge isn't slightly forward, there's a more cohesive presentation of sound within a space. So I appreciate that kind of information. If a guitarist, you know, is over here on the left and he's strumming something and you can kind of hear it ring out and kind of fill out the space around it. Acoustic recordings or any kind of recording in a big space where there's echoes or reverberations, I feel on the ADI are cleaner. They're not quite as sometimes, Well, sometimes they're not quite as quiet, but they're not as apparent. There are recordings sometimes where I felt D90 overemphasized a reflection off of a back wall, and it kind of shoved it back into the stage a little bit unnaturally. With ADI2, it doesn't have some of that overemphasis, right? Things just move within the recorded space, fill that recorded space out more naturally, I thought. But again, $500 up and you get what I think is better staging, just a blacker background and overall better resolve at the expense of what some people say it's soft. You know, if you like a harder, more impactful presentation, there may be better products than ADI2 for you. But for my taste and in my systems, I do really feel like, again, the $500 difference between the two is worthwhile. But going back to the D90 after having the ADI2 is not a big step down. You know, maybe it's 5% or so. You get over $1,000, we get into the land of diminishing returns because it's just small fractions of a second, tiny bits of information that are not as vivid when I step back into D90. Now, on the flip side, what happens when we start with something like the Modi 3 or the D10 and we go up into D90? Let's look at those specifically. Now, both of these are top. My gosh, this thing is heavy. Both of these are topping products. You can see the differences in size. What I like is when I start with D10 and I move up into D90, it's as if a haze has been lifted. I like D90 because it does have that pop, that presentation that kind of draws your attention. But the moving into D90, right, the staging opens up. It's more three-dimensional. It's not as flat. Now with the Modi again has that fullness, that touch of body in the mid-range. So tonally, there were times when I really liked Modi and how it presented things, and there were times when I felt that D90 was a bit dry. Now again, I would adjust this with like a tube amp. Add just a little bit of body into the presentation and get a better mid-range tonality. However, for this review, we stuck with solid state to just kind of focus in on the characteristics of the DACs themselves. So I like the tonality of Modi. The problems with Modi is that it is very smoothed over and soft. Bass kind of loses some textures. It's just too full, too round. Even in the mid-range, you've got beautiful tonality, but we lack texture. Texture as in literally sometimes the way it feels against your ears, against your face, but also the way it sounds. So the texture of like fingers against a string versus a pick, or the differences in the kinds of strings on a bass guitar, for example. Some basses use a round wound, which is punchier. Some use a flat wound. Flat wound is softer, more mellow. Right? Those kinds of details that I appreciate as a musician and a lover of music are sometimes kind of lost and kind of smeared when I listen on Modi because it does have that fullness. Now what I like, though, for the longest time, EL DAC has kind of been the gatekeeper. If I get a DAC and it is not above and beyond EL DAC, I maybe won't review it as excitedly. And there's a lot of things at $400, $500, $600 that just are not obviously better than EL DAC, so I lose my excitement. But what I like with EL DAC is that it does have just a touch of that really beautiful tonality that Modi does without that smoothed overness. So what are the differences? When I go from EL DAC into D90, I get a more cohesive presentation of space. I get that blacker background. What I also appreciate with D90 going up from EL DAC is just a bit more detail. I can literally hear just a little bit deeper into the recording. A little bit more of that transient information, those quiet sounds as things settle. A little bit more of the nuance between musicians, the bends, maybe the flick of the wrist, stuff like that. It's the same benefits that we get when we go from D90 to the RME ADI2. You make improvements in digital, you tend to get just a cleaner background, a little bit more resolve in terms of those super quiet, super low-level sounds. But overall, I think D90 is a phenomenal product. I mean, it's priced at $699, $799 if you need MQA. It's got a gambit of just inputs and outputs, RCA and XLR out, so you can do single-ended or balanced, easy enough to switch between. It's hefty. It's got a nice weight to it. I mean, it definitely doesn't feel like it is poorly put together. It definitely feels like it's going to last. Overall, again, it presented a discernible, an apparent upgrade or improvement over EL DAC. enough to necessitate that I do think it's worth the buy. If you need MQA, if you like MQA, if it's convenient for you and you enjoy it, by all means get the D90 MQA. If you don't care about MQA, you don't use MQA, get the D90 standard. I mean, either way, at $6.99 and $7.99, the product holds tremendous value and I think performs very well. So as always, guys, thank you for watching. Please leave your questions and comments below.